So we're seeing a number of organizations and people now. Yale is one organization. I mentioned a number of other universities that we're starting to work with as well, which have started to say that the real path to greatness, to going especially from good to great, is building on strengths, not focusing on weaknesses. So for example, if we get back, here's a typical 360. So we get back and evaluate the, so here's our 16 competencies. So we're kind of in the middle of the chart there with a lot of them. A few are a bit above average, a few are a little below average. What do we end up doing? We end up focusing on the ones that are the lowest. And is that going to have a huge impact? If this individual was able to take those, maybe increase them by 30, 40%, get them a little bit above average, is that going to have a big overall impact? It's a little less average now, that's all. They're not going to get to extraordinary leadership by doing that. They're not going to be in the top 10% of leaders, not even going to be in the top 75% of leaders, probably, by doing that. Think about the best leader that you've ever had, or the best leader that you know of. What were their profound strengths? So just, what were a couple quick examples? Profound strengths.
No micromanaging.
Didn't micromanage. What other strengths? They lead change effectively. Other strengths?
They're really good at being human.
Really good at being human, being real, being authentic. Okay, yeah.
Empowers you.
Okay, so trust and empowerment is high. Sure. So we could come up with a long list, I'm sure, around the room. Now, did that leader have any weaknesses? Were they perfect? Were they well-rounded? Were they good at everything? No, I'm sure they weren't. Rarely when we do this exercise do we come up with people saying, yeah, he could walk on water. Well, they were absolutely perfect. No, they usually had some weaknesses of some sort. But then what kept those? Why did you still put them in the category of one of the best leaders? Why didn't those weaknesses undermine and bring them down so that you don't feel they're one of the best leaders? But overall, would you say that their strengths were overshadowing and overweighting quite a bit their weaknesses? So they had weaknesses, but they were overcome by the strengths. Well, the opposite effect, of course, happens as well. You think about the worst leader. I think about the guy years ago that I quit and left the organization. Horrible leader, and the big issue there was trust and integrity. Just felt like when you shook his hand, you had to check and see if you still had all your fingers left. It just not somebody who really felt very trust. And so that overshadows so much else. So that we call that a fatal flaw. It's something that it's a weakness that is so serious that it's fatal to their ability to lead others. It's a flaw. It goes beyond just being a weakness and crosses the line to become something that really undermines their overall leadership. And so when those start showing up, then the opposite thing happens, where the fatal flaws, because if I was really honest and really looked at that guy and said, well, yeah, he had some strengths, yeah, I guess, maybe, yeah, I suppose, but I'm so drawn by the fatal flaw that I can't see a lot of the strengths. If there's a fatal flaw, we clearly need to focus there. So that's the one caveat to strength-based approach, is if an individual has a fatal flaw, that's where we do have to start, because people can't see the other stuff. And when they have a fatal flaw, the number of times they show up in the top 10% of leaders is really, really tiny. Their overall leadership effectiveness is at the 18th percentile when there's just one fatal flaw. Again, we see some of the companies that have been using this for a while now. DirecTV, Vice President here, is talking about how focusing on strengths has really helped them to push existing strengths over the edge to exceptional. So here's the really good news. You don't have to be a superhero to be an extraordinary leader. We don't need to be good at all 16 of those competencies. So here's what the research shows, the opposite of fatal flaws. That in our database, when we have no profound strengths, so nothing at the 90th percentile, and no fatal flaws, so that's that kind of middle of the road one I just showed you a few minutes ago, the number of times that that profile or where that overall leadership effectiveness is scored is at the 34th percentile. So out of 10 leaders, that leader would be ranked at about 6th or 7th on the list. Not very good. So what do you think happens if that leader takes one strength, just one strength, to the 90th percentile? What's the overall impact? It's just over 60th percentile with one strength, and it doesn't matter which one. 2 strengths takes us to the 72nd. 3 strengths, we're now up into the top 20% of leaders with 3 profound strengths. Because again, you think back, when you rate your top leaders, if they're really good at 3 things, really good at those 3 things, that really stands out. That really elevates their overall perception of them as a leader. If they're really good at 5 of the 16 competencies, they are now extraordinary leaders. They are in the top 10% of leaders.